fortunate enough to have benefited from the system. And this scares me. It scares me that Europe and here there has been a reverse of situations where these essential things are really what's necessary in order to advance on culture. But I come from a country that we have never even started yet, so I don't know where we're going, but I'm here. And as you see, there's also something else, because what I just said right now, I think there are not a lot of African people here, right? Is there anyone else from Africa here, from any African countries? No. Okay. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I thank you, UNIMA, from the bottom of my heart, because of your efforts and that enabled me to be here today, to be able to participate in this meeting, and I'm grateful from the bottom of my heart. And Mimak, who gave me a grant that will allow me that allowed me to stay here and pay for my expenses. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. They did this because if they hadn't done this, Africa wouldn't have been here, and that would be a tragedy, I think. So I'm very honored, like I said before. I'm fascinated, actually, by everything that I've seen until now. All of these videos of these incredible performances, it's just crazy how puppets have exploded, and the actors, contemporary actors today, have done extraordinary things. And whenever I participate in these events, I mature, I learn a great deal of things, and thanks to that, I'm able to advance as well, because where I come from, there are no puppetry schools, there are no theater schools, and it's extremely important. What you do here is extremely important. It matters what UNIMA does, and that allows, at least allows me, to really learn and advance and evolve. So, where I come from, puppetry does not exist in Senegal. There is no tradition. We do not know of puppetry. And I've been fortunate enough. I come from the theater world, Loklu. I come from clowns, and that's where I got to know about puppets. I saw a number of possibilities. I saw a lot of works, a lot of videos, and I said, wow. So it's just crazy, really. I went in search of something. I've always went in search of something as an actor, as a clown. I always thought that something was missing in order to achieve the work that I was doing in Senegal. And when I found out about puppetry, I said, that's what was missing. That's precisely what was missing, because for me, puppets allow me, at least where I come from, allows me to talk about things that are unheard of. Like, for example, some ethnicities, like, and some other things like sexual incisions. For example, my grandparents believed in that, and I would go in search of something to tell them that that's done and over with. You need to put that aside, because that's bad for that's that's suffering for these women. It's a lot of suffering, like early marriage. Like I told my mom, she got married when she was 13. She had a daughter at 13. She was a child herself. But that was the culture, and that's what used to happen. And now other things. And so when I saw puppetry, I said, wow, I'm finally able to talk about this without being attacked personally, because this is coming from the mouth of a puppet. And this way, I was able to develop puppetry in Senegal and make it more known, and this wonderful thing that we're able to do with them. And recently, Marta from Quebec, she just mentioned Marta, right? Yes. Martha Adams. Unfortunately, she's not here with us today, but she speaks so well and she's so spontaneous. And she said that we cannot say only puppets today. We cannot only say puppet, the manipulator of the object. It's so varied, and we can do that with a significant number of different things. There are so many possibilities out there, and we can't just limit ourselves to calling it puppetry. This surpasses puppetry, really, and puppetry will surprise us in the next few years. What I mean is the theater of manipulation and everything that can be done with it, and what will be done in the next few years. Therefore, that's why I'm here, a clown in the world of puppets, and it's I I created a show where I talk about my life, where I could talk about I was trusted by different families. I was a modern slave in France. I worked in a family. I had no papers. I was ashamed and embarrassed to talk about my life. And when I finally found out about puppets, I said I finally can tell my story. I can finally tell about my story and to show these women that they're also able to express themselves. That was my first creation. The director, Isabelle Verland, and then Marcia de Castro, who also doesn't come from the world of puppetry. And then I'm advancing today in my center. I have included with this wonderful woman here to develop programs with young people for the youth so they can work with puppets, and thankfully we're evolving in this. So thanks to puppetry, I would like to go back to my show, which is a Petit bout de bois, which is called Petit bout de bois. It's the small piece of wood. It talks about small children from the streets in Senegal that frequently come from families who are miserable, disenfranchised, and they live in the rural areas, and they see their children in Marabout, which is a body counselor. And when the women saw these children from Marabout, they would not be concerned anymore about how these children were living, in what conditions they were living, and so on, and how they have, and because they have so many children, to be able to raise some of them and to send them there means less mouths to feed. And today we have close to 30,000 kids who are raised in the streets of Senegal and live in horrible conditions. Everybody knows, but no one attacks this problem. We talk about this, journalists and reporters write about it, but at the same time, we don't talk about it because there's a whole religion thing behind it, and then we're afraid to criticize this practice. To talk about it means to touch religion. How do we talk about this with puppets? How do we write about this? Write a play. And when I saw Sylvie's work, I talked to her straight away. step by step at first to a stage that included writing, and then how she saw how I looked at her frequently. I was reading my text and she said, if you ask me to direct your work, I will accept it. And that's exactly what I wanted. So I wrote a text, I wrote a script initially, which is a sequence to street kids, because these kids today, most of them become criminals. They run away from schools at Marabu, and they would rather live on the streets than go back home, because if they go back home, they're actually resent to another Marabu, and so they would rather live in the streets. And then I went to ask them why. Why do you live in the streets? How long have you been living in the streets? How long have you abandoned and left your family behind? And then Marabuto, I'm sorry. And then I started writing the text, the script, and then what the children told me really was horrifying. And the first text that I sent Sylvie, I'll tell you a little bit about what did you think of, tell us a little bit about what did you think about the text? What is difficult in Patricia's proposal in terms of theater is how to take the necessary steps to what she wanted to express politically on what could be done. The first text didn't really satisfy these criteria. And the reason is because it really came from my heart. To find out that in my country, schools that were teaching the Al-Quran, and there were prisons in schools, and small beggars that would go to the marabutos, and they should bring about 500 francs every day, which is an amount of money that they're probably getting on the streets every day. And that going back to Marabuto, they didn't have with this they didn't have if they didn't have this quantity every day, they were actually beaten around and locked away for several days to show the others as an example of what they should have done, because this money should be brought every single day. And so the kids told me this, that they were just abandoned and locked away without any food. And I didn't know where the theater could take space in there. When Sylvie told me we need to go beyond that, something that comes from you, because when I looked at these kids, I also saw myself, because this practice it's common, and it's been going on for a long time since the arrival of the Arabs, then that tried to teach Islamic religion to Senegal, and they tried to colonize Senegal, and therefore Senegalese who found out about the Muslim religion and didn't want to lose their religion, they started educating their kids and to teach them on the Islamic culture, the Quran, so that the French colonizer wouldn't gain any territory, and so that there wouldn't be any more Catholics than Islamic people. And in Senegal, we as kids, we've lived in the streets for so long that we thought it was something normal to live in the streets. So when I saw these kids, I saw myself as a child. As a child, I wasn't free. I had to get some water by walking kilometers with a bucket, and I should have been at school, but I couldn't be at school because then I was beaten around in school. And when I saw these kids in the streets asking for money, I said to myself, because I was a child, I said I thought that I wanted to be like them because I thought they were free and they could do whatever they wanted. But when I started thinking about it and going back to my experience as a child, that's when the text really came to life. And that's how I thank you, Sylvie, because I was able to delve into my own story in order to come up with the text Petit bout de bois. Because in the beginning, Sylvie actually answered this. This is what you're doing is very political, she said. But when I thought about how there were 30,000 kids in a country of 14 million inhabitants, I said, this is something big. Children who are violated, who are. It's just something very strong within me, and so I have Sylvie to thank for the way that this came to be. Because when I finished writing, I said to myself, I have to create this performance, this show, interpreted by myself and by street kids that I've met throughout this process. Made a promise to them to come back to them to show them my work, because these are kids that had never seen a performance before. My story emerged from this experience, a text made of puppets that's going to be interpreted by children. Unfortunately, didn't have any money, so I thank all the people and the organizations who were able to co-create this with me. This project, this puppet project, in this occasion, I was able to go back to these kids who live in a center near the capital of Senegal, Dakar. And then I met Vera Rosano and Sylvie and Cecile Balade, who are puppeteers themselves with training in the discipline. And especially two kids that I had taken testimonials from. And so we started thinking about some workshops in puppetry. These two kids, we created these puppets with them. They actually created and they learned so much and they learned so fast, and they're able to take over and learn and become self-employed and to create hierarchies in societies. And when they created these puppets, they were so happy, and they created them so extremely well. I wasn't able to create a performance with them, but I was able to give them a small taste of creating puppets, to play with puppets, because they obviously created a lot of puppets that were not inserted into the performance, but that they themselves held to themselves. These stories are very powerful because these are stories of kids. These are real stories, and these kids couldn't count on anyone, and these puppets therefore help them to go through their process, to be able to express and tell their stories to their friends. And of course, I'll give Sylvie the stage soon enough so she'll be able to talk about her work as a dramatist regarding this performance. That's it. Thank you. I predicted as a moderator I should speak more, but it's hard. I asked many times if they really wanted me to be moderator, because in the event of the old colonial idea where we should really ask ourselves, interrogate the class of directors actually on how we conduct our representations, how in the case in this case, to be able to have a voice to share. That's what formed Patricia's story, the will to share all the time and to pose some questions and to go deep and delve deep. I think she was a warrior. So when I came into the story, I saw first her first text the first time, and I was in Senegal. I had never gone to Senegal before. I had never been to Africa before, so it was quite a shock, to be frank. And I found out what working in the hot scorching sun, what that really meant. And then she was able to transform her life. And I'm talking about the organic part, everything that she brings into the story. And that was my role as director in this moment. She came with the tomatoes, let's say, and then we inserted the scenography into the work. And when looking at what happens there, so these things matter, and she is a formidable actress to direct. She has no preconceived ideas, and that also counts for a director, because in reality it means that she takes her own flight. I'm not sure it's orthodox, very orthodox in a sense, but it was just passionate. We did 2 residencies together in Senegal and then 2 other in Quebec, and every time the kids realized, and for me it was extremely emotional. We said it was a monument to African Renaissance, and we talked a lot about this. We've worked this with a lot of kids, and that's just a marvelous memory. And I get a little emotional about this. To create in a country where there are no means. Some countries are rich, and I think Senegal was. Our politicians are terrible. They fill their pockets with money and they don't give a single penny to people so they can do something good with it. So it's not easy. It's a creation process that's very complicated. First of all, you write your dossier and then you send that dossier to the Ministry of Culture, and then they dump it in the trash or they don't read it, and then you have to get to some sort of agreement with him. Oh, if you give me some money, then I'll give you some money back, and then we'll be able to scratch each other's back. And unless you don't do that, they're never going to help you. It's very hard. But I was able, after 25 years or so, I was finally able to work in theater, and then I created and acted and created my own space. Every year I advanced a little bit more. And for this performance, that's the first time that I was able to receive something from the Ministry of Culture. I'm not going to say how much, but because you're going to laugh about it. But for me, it was very important because it was the first time this happened, that this allowed me to have. Because when I create, I think how my performance should be done. We don't have the technical means like in other places, but we can dream about it, making a performance about with lights. I don't even dream about that actually. I just try to be realistic. When I create light, for example, I don't think about it. I just try to make my play, my theater, where there are no lights, where the theaters are not equipped, places are not equipped, and I bring the things to this performance where what I want people to see. So performances take place under a baobab tree, for example, or a recreational facility or part of a home. But the first thing I think about it is how my performance can travel in a taxi bus and to reach other places. And when I create, I have to think about all of this. And because how can my performance fit into two suitcases, and I can take a plane, board a plane, and I can conduct it anywhere. So this is my first thought, and I've always thought about that. So for me, a performance should include all the territory. And I don't work in theater just because just because when I live in a country, when you live in a country where everything still needs to be done, a lot of things still need to be done, and things still need to be gained. Emancipation, women's emancipation, access to clean water. I cannot do theater just because it's pretty, and I want people to look at it and say, "Oh, that's pretty," and I would love for this to be the case, but that's not the case for me. So I chose to live in Africa, and the years that and then in the past years I've seen so many people leave my country in the worst possible conditions, taking boats and small boats, all of them cluttering 50 people inside these boats, and I saw these kinds of things every day to go to. These people were left for Europe, so it's just crazy. It's like it's like slavery, because they're forcing our ancestors, they force our ancestors to leave for Europe, and so these are even worse conditions than slavery time. They don't. They seem not to think that to they seem to think that you can't do anything if you live in Africa. You can't realize anything. I come from a small village, and then I say, well, even if you come from a small village, even if 10 people can benefit from an artistic performance, I think these 10 people are already, uh, are already, it's already great. And then I think theater is part of our problems, that they're part of our life. But why would I abandon my place to go in search of a French director? And because we don't have puppets where I come from, and if I want my kids, my street kids, to be seen in all the world, I want this performance to travel around. I don't want just I don't want to just do anything just for the sake of doing it. I want this to have meaning. There's this whole baggage that can help my performance that talks about kids, street kids, and there's poetry in it, and that's what I'm in search of, and that's what I went in search of everywhere. And if I had the opportunity to go in search of this here, I would have come here or Australia or wherever that might have been. I would have searched the means for my performance to come alive. It's a minimalist performance with a little bit of tomato, with a little bit of wood, and that my artistic performance could be correct and could be seen everywhere, and that you forget that, oh, it's talking about street kids and the need. I think that the world is a small village today, and I cannot think anymore in terms of black and white. Human beings and human values, this is what matters to me. So I'm not talking about the the colonial era, or I'm talking about human beings. Today the world is a global village, and wherever I perform, when I look at these small Canadian children watching my performance, they're like the small Senegalese children, once the performance is over, they say the same thing as the Senegalese kids when the performance is over. So really, there are no barriers. Art really is what enables the human being to understand each other, even if they don't speak the same language. It's a one thing about art. Art has to travel. Doesn't matter where. Doesn't matter where it's at. Doesn't matter in which village. It needs to surpass these borders. And I get sad whenever I hear about an artist that couldn't be here because, for example, she wasn't able to get a visa. That's just terrible. Today in my village, there are women who don't even know how to write or read, but they have a smartphone. Yes, because they want to be in the world. They want to know what happens. They want to click and see what happens on the other side, or that there's music, a new song, or a new artist. And today, the fashion is nowadays the fashion is color, fashion is blue or brown. It doesn't matter. They have a cell phone because they want to belong in the world. So what we need to give our children in Africa, they need to know that it's possible, that they can be in the world. And it's not the politicians, but it's up to us to do this. We are all linked, and the world is a global village. We are all connected. That's the truth. And why are there still visas then? Why are they still needed? Because it won't allow an artist to follow its training, his or her training. We're blocking them because of a visa? But because Africa is divided into many countries, and people wanted to install these borders. What are these borders? Human beings should be able to transpond these borders, these barriers, and not create them. It's incomprehensible for me. I just cannot understand it. I can't fathom why this still happens. So what you're going to be watching the performance, I'm really actually very excited to show you, because after all I've seen, whenever I see my work, you know, I get wowed myself because it's so beautiful. It's so wonderful, and you'll be able to see this performance, Petit bout de bois, and what I wanted to show and what it means. So the first stage was to write the text, the script, and to find a director to involve the kids. The the public, for myself, it's not a public that wants to consume art and then leave. The public, in my understanding, is someone who I want to talk with after the performance is over, because I want to know what they felt. I want to know what they understood. That's what I like, the enjoy, the exchange. So I did this with the kids so they could not only be spectators, because whenever I create, I understand that there are many stages. So I invite the kids, even if I have just 10 minutes to be with them. I like to have this sort of exchange and feedback with them, because at the end of the day they can tell me, oh, I didn't understand it. Why this and this made me think about that, and it allows me to go beyond. Whenever there's a performance, it allows me to continue with this performance, because whenever I gather these ideas and this feedback from the kids, I and then we face these problems all over again. We find so many strong children that are able to say incredible things, and then we end up realizing it's not normal for parents to abandon their kids in the streets. So please, we need to send these kids somewhere, and them to a ministry that is responsible for them, and not in the way that happens. So this, in my concept, that's the last stage of the performance. It can only happen when all the previous stages have been completed: the text, the directing, the testimonials. And I hope this will not bore you. And that's why I'm stopping right now, and I invite you, all of you, to watch this performance. And if some of you want to talk about it later, well, I'll be here, and I would really like to talk to you about it. And I would like to thank you so much and say, talk to you later, Patricia.